let's talk about how to get out of overwhelm and what overwhelm is really doing versus not doing in your life and how it's actually not serving you to move forward. If this is your first time joining me, my name is Tara Walsh and I'm a business coach and life coach for entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, beauty business owners. I got you. So I got this message this morning from a student of mine who was freaking out. She said, I'm freaking out. My longtime team member of 8 months, she's amazing. She just put in her 2 weeks. And I'm only 2 weeks into hiring my next employee. She's not ready to take over. She was freaking out, right? And so I could sense that overwhelm was happening, panic was happening. This was like late at night and she's just, and so I didn't respond for a very specific reason at that time because A, business boundaries, B, because I wanted her to sit in the emotion. So oftentimes when we are feeling negative emotions, we want to avoid them, run away from them. But part of the human experience is having a range of emotions and not just trying to escape and get away from the negative emotions. So part of it is I wanted her nervous system to come down before logic can kick in. So oftentimes when we're in overwhelm, we are panicked. We are in our fight or flight or freeze or fawn response, a survival response. And if we ever want to have this sense of thriving in our life, then we need to make friends with having negative emotions too. And so when she's in a fight or flight, reaching out in a panic, I know that's not the time that we're going to problem solve. That is the time to get our nervous system to regulate, our body to calm down so that we can effectively problem solve. Because when you are trying to problem solve with the same mindset and the same survival thinking that got you into the problem in the first place, then you're just going to repeat the pattern and stay in overwhelm. Oftentimes when we're feeling overwhelmed by something, what usually ends up happening is that we are projecting the worst case scenario outcome of whatever it is that we're stressing about. So in her case, I would imagine, now I haven't had a conversation with her, I did respond to her today, but I would imagine that she was thinking, okay, this team member's going to leave. There's a lot of money that this team member is generating that's now going to walk out the door that she doesn't really have another team member that can help step up and replace yet. Right? And so in this instance, we have to take ownership over the fact that there aren't too many solutions available. She, if she's, let's just say this team member's bringing in $5,000 a month. And so what are we going to do to keep $5,000 a month coming? Well, we can problem solve for that. She could start taking clients again, but I think she's still taking some clients. So maybe she could take more clients. We could try to expedite this current team member, the one that's only been trained for 2 weeks, and try to get her up to snuff. But chances are that would ruin her onboarding experience and actually get us a worse result. We can lose that money. That's an option too. We could hire somebody with a lot of experience and try to get them in really quickly, but chances are we won't retain that employee. So we're just going to have this same problem here in a couple of months. And so the way that I look at that as like the various different options, because there's always solutions to every problem, you just get to pick which one makes most sense. To me, I look at it as she's already got the solution in place. It's just not here now. So she's got one team member that she's training who's 2 weeks in. So by the time the other team member leaves, that team member will be 4 weeks in. So there might be some retention of the clients. But ultimately, you can't provide a service when you don't have a service provider to provide it. And so I kind of look at it as, well, she's already working on the solution. So really what to address now is her panic and the meaning that she's placing on whatever's causing her to panic. So when you think about situations that you might be in with your business that cause you panic, we'll just use money as an example. When you freak out about money, when you freak out about sales, when you freak out about losing clients, this happens a lot when people want to raise their prices or they think they should raise their prices. They're so worried about losing clients. Well, what is the reason why we're raising prices? Just because you feel like it? Is there, you haven't raised it in 3 years, so now it's time? Like when we have that thinking, that approach of not really understanding the strategy of what we're implementing to try and get a result, then yeah, it's going to feel a lot of unknown. However, if you raise your prices in this example with the intention because you're so booked that you don't have much time available, therefore your time is worth more, then we can actually have a strategy and intention of we want to raise our prices enough to drop off some clients so that we get our time back, but it doesn't affect our income. Then all of a sudden it's not as overwhelming and scary. Oftentimes overwhelm comes from having too tight of a timeline to accomplish something. You made up the timeline, right? I have this with money sometimes too, when I'm like, I've got to make this amount of sales in this month. It's my intrusive thought that comes in, like, especially in the mornings when I don't have my guards up and my mental strategies going. It's like, oh my God, if we don't get this many sales this month, what's going to happen next month? None of that is relevant to this exact moment, especially when I'm just waking up in the morning, haven't had my coffee yet. And so overwhelm really does serve to throw us into survival mode, which for the most part is your brain's way of keeping you alive. That's your brain's job. Your brain is not created to help you thrive and live your best life and be evolved and all that stuff. Your brain is meant to keep you alive. It's got a lot of things it's got to run: your body, your digestion, it's got hypervigilance. And when we've had trauma or we've had negative experiences, we tend to tune into the things that we perceive as a threat. So in this instance of what I'm giving, a longtime team member putting in her 2 weeks all of a sudden feels like a threat. And so our brain perceives it as a threat. And so then we operate and we look for evidence of how this is a threat. I like to come from the perspective of taking the emotion out of it so that the emotion is not driving the train and logic can kick in. Oftentimes my coaching students, this is what I walk them through. I like to look at our brain as like two parts. There is your prefrontal cortex. That is where the logic, rational thought lives. It's the front of the brain. Then you have your survival brain, which is kind of your amygdala. It's the one that produces the hormones that feel stress, cortisol, all that kind of stuff. And it's the survival-based thinking. Those two have a really hard time operating at the same time. So logic cannot exist while we are stressed and in survival. Therefore, if you want to have thriving and be intentional about creating a life that you love and that doesn't tank you every other day, you're likely operating from a lot of survival-based thinking or anxious thoughts. Anxiety is a survival response. It is a stress hormone-based response. And so we can't have both working at the same time. They don't work together. You're either in survival thinking, which if you're in a constant state of anxiety, that's what you're doing, or you're in a rational, logical mind frame. So in her case, so she is in survival thinking of like, oh my God, I'm not going to have likely this income. I think it's tied to a money thing that all of a sudden that team member who's producing sales and done great, that team member is going to leave. And now all of the sales that she was generating are going to go away. So when that happens, I always look for, take the emotion out of it, right? What is the lesson I'm meant to learn in this? Right? If you get an undesired result, if you're having an experience you don't like, and this is what serves me and I offer it to you, I'm either going to get the result I want or the lesson I need. In this instance, it doesn't sound like she's getting the result she wants. Therefore, there's a lesson in it. And from a business perspective, I look at what are the processes of the business that is not getting us the desired result. If her desired result is to have consistent and growing income and she only has her and one other team member, well, it seems like she's very heavily dependent financially on that team member producing. And that may be tied to her personal finances, that with this team member producing whatever amount of sales she has, she is taking a portion of that as profit, as we teach inside of our programs. And so now she may be worried that her personal bills are going to be affected and her ability to support herself personally are going to be affected by this team member leaving. So I look at two processes that are happening there that would be great to serve as her lessons in this, that she then can be empowered to go change so that she doesn't experience this again. One being, if her personal finances are so tight that a fluctuation or even a seasonal fluctuation of her business has that much of a panic-inducing response, chances are she may be living paycheck to paycheck. I don't know that if that's her case, but it would make sense that if you're concerned about a drop in income from your business, temporary as it may be, that's then going to impact and tank your ability to pay your bills. We might be having a lifestyle that's too big, or we might be living paycheck to paycheck, which would be a great lesson to learn in this instance to then be more intentional about managing our finances in a way that 1 month, 2 month, even 3 months of hiccups isn't going to drastically affect how we provide for our families and ourselves. Here's the thing. This is common knowledge, right? It's common knowledge that it's not great to live paycheck to paycheck. It's not a pleasurable experience. And it's probably not a desired result for most people. However, if you know that knowledge-wise, logic-wise, but you're not operating and you're not behaving in a way that gets you out of paycheck to paycheck living, guess what the universe or God or Thor or whoever you ascribe to is going to do? Put you in a position that you're uncomfortable with to cause the change that is in your greatest and best good. So if I'm looking at the learning opportunity that she could take this as this is happening for her, not to her, one option we could look at improving upon so that she doesn't experience this again is look at, is she living paycheck to paycheck, and what are some ways that we can get her out of working or living paycheck to paycheck? What are some ways that we can get a budget in place? What are some ways that she can have savings set aside so that she has a little bit of a windfall in case whatever happens? Because it's not just a team member quitting, right? It could be that the air conditioning goes out and she has to pay for it. It could be that, let's see, we've got strong storms here in the South, like tree falls on your house, and yes, our insurance covers some, but you have to meet your deductible first. How can we stop living paycheck to paycheck so life's inconveniences don't tank your ability to continue to move forward? Having money is not the game-changing thing that most people think it is, but it does make financial hardships more of an inconvenience than life-altering. So that might be one takeaway for her personally from this experience that would benefit her. Alternatively, looking at the business, how do we prevent this from happening in the business in the future? How do we prevent there being so much demand and so much income coming in from one team member that all of a sudden, if that team member leaves, we're SOL? Well, it sounds like when she hired that second team member, probably should have happened a few weeks, maybe even a few months before, and have some sort of marker in place, some sort of trigger in place that when one team member gets to a certain level percentage of being booked, that then triggers us to hire another team member. So it's never solely dependent on one team member, right? Most of you are solo business owners. And so, yeah, you kind of experience this, that if you ever get sick, if you ever want to go on vacation, if you ever get an injury, your income completely stops. She's building out a team. So therefore, we could have more processes in place that we can have other team members step in to meet the needs of sales. And so that might be something to look into for her, is at what level of this longtime team member being booked do we need to hire so that we didn't have this situation come up? Some of this is unavoidable. Like, she had no idea that this other team member was going to leave, but it is the nature of running a business that there's turnover, right? Especially in our industry, turnover tends to be a little bit high. We have a lot of a transient natured industry where people get pregnant, they move, they're only in it, for a certain period of years. They want to move on in life. They want to go do something else. Like, it's common. So when you run a team, that is part of what you're signing up for, is some transient nature, of your team because of just the industry and who it draws into it. And so I would look at, for her specifically, at what point would it have made sense to maybe hire on another person sooner than she did now, so that even if a team member leaves, we've got backup or we've got options so that we're not losing the sale. And that really is ultimately what we're looking at here from a strategy and a data standpoint, is she's got X amount of dollars coming into the business and we need a service provider to produce those sales. And right now we're about to lose that service provider. So how does the business protect those sales? So that's kind of the twofold way I look at this particular situation, and how I look at overwhelm is, how is this happening for me and not to me? Where is the lesson that I can learn from this so that I can grow and evolve and not have to keep learning this lesson over and over again? Where is my power in all of this? Where is, what meaning am I placing on this thing that's stressing me out? Is there too tight of a timeline that I just randomly pulled out of a hat? Are these thoughts serving me? Can I take the emotion out of it and just look at it as data-based decision making? Can I look at it from a process standpoint? What steps along the way of the process didn't get me to the end result that I want to experience? And what could I test out and try differently? And also, is there really a problem? That's kind of the way I'm going to wrap this up. With her specifically, her panic, sure, she's caught off guard. So there is some kind of like getting your bearings again. But also that she's going to be fine no matter what happens. That is the thing about life. And I find myself saying it more and more these days, is that most of life is lived in the middle, right? We have great, amazing moments. We have really sad, horrible, tragic moments, but most of life is lived in the middle. And so if you think about it right now, you're watching this. Or listening to this. You're listening to it on a phone. You're listening to it in a car. At this exact moment, you're probably okay, right? Maybe you could be better. Maybe you could be worse. But chances are, if you're listening to some sort of business education or life coaching education, you're okay. Could be better. Could also be worse. But most of life is lived in the okay. So if you're okay right now, chances are that you're also okay right now. And right now you're okay. And right now you're okay. And yesterday you were okay too. And tomorrow, chances are you're going to be okay. And there's going to be a couple moments where you're not okay, like you're really not okay. And there's going to be a couple moments that you are living the high life and like it is amazing, but most of life is lived in the okay. So when you can recognize that most of life, I'm okay, then no matter what perceived threat that you have in, whether it's psychological, mental, emotional, spiritual, chances are on the other side of it, you're still going to be okay. And so you can have faith and trust that you are capable of handling whatever's going to come up for you at that time that it's going to come up. And no matter what you choose, you're still going to be okay. Catastrophizing things waiting for the other shoe to drop. Worst case scenario thinking is a survival mechanism way of thinking, and it's nowhere near the way that you can thrive. Trust me, I've been there. I have spent the last 2 years trying to heal how my brain works like that, understanding how the brain works, and choosing, being intentional about the thoughts that I choose. I'll leave you with this one last thing that I've said on the podcast multiple times, but I'll say it here again. You have about 30,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot of thoughts. You are not your thoughts. That is way too many things for you to define that every single thought is exactly who you are. And so here's the thing is that when we're unintentional about being mindful of the thoughts that we're thinking and we just let our brain go wild, it's going to be triggered by whatever we're influenced by, whatever we're feeding our brain, which for most of us is social media. And for most of you, you don't have good boundaries with social media. So you follow things that don't make you feel good, right? And so you are being fed a lot of things that you're not enough or comparison or I should look like that. And we're following somebody's Instagram life, right? The highlight reel of their life and comparing it to our actual life. And so we have this filter, we're feeding our brain the sense that we're not enough or we're not doing enough. So you're going to continue to see evidence of that because that's what you're feeding your brain. And those are the thoughts that you're thinking. And we tend to think the same thoughts over and over again because we don't have new stimuli. We're creatures of habit. So chances are you wake up and you have the same routine and the same thing you eat or drink and the same path you take to work and the same work schedule and the same work people. And then you go home and you meet with the same people and you're eating similar meals and it's all structured in routine. So you don't have new stimuli coming in to trigger new thoughts. And so our thoughts are the same. Those 30,000 thoughts tend to be the same. And oftentimes we will dismiss really happy thoughts or positive thoughts because we're not tuned in to looking for the good in life. And we tend to let the intrusive, scary thoughts stick around and set up shop far too long in our brains. So I want you to start to challenge those thoughts that don't serve you. If you have a thought that you're thinking that's triggering anxiety, overwhelm, fear, panic, ask yourself, is that true? Is it true? Is it a true thought? No matter what your answer is, the next question you ask yourself, is this a thought I choose to continue to think? If you choose to continue to think it, then you are empowered and you can suffer the consequences or sit with it or try to find a solution or whatever, or you can choose to think a different thought. Welcome to Self-Awareness 101. All right, that's all I've got for you guys today. If this is the type of content you'd like to see, hit me up in the DMs. Let me know on Instagram DMs. If you like this stuff, you want to hear more about it. This is my jam. Otherwise, I'll stick to business strategy. But I thought this was a relevant message to share with you guys today on how panic and overwhelm in business really ties to your mindset and how you actually are more in control of your mindset than you think. All right, have a good one.